Welcome to Political Perspectives. I'm Hugo Gurdon, Editor-in-Chief of the Washington Examiner. If you're joining us on the YouTube channel, please remember to like and subscribe to increase our numbers there, increase the community of people looking at Washington Examiner video. I'm joined, as usual, by Byron York, the Chief Political Correspondent of the Washington Examiner. And Byron, we have a lot to talk about. The first thing I want to do is have a look at a clip of the Vice President addressing the Munich Security Conference just a few days ago.
The threat that I worry the most about vis-a-vis Europe is not Russia, it's not China, it's not any other external actor. And what I worry about is the threat from within, the retreat of Europe from some of its most fundamental values, values shared with the United States of America.
So, Byron, this speech of Vice President Vance's dropped like a depth charge into European sensibilities. He criticized them for undermining their own culture. He said that his security concerns were primarily about internal problems, not external threats. That the Europeans were essentially sacrificing the values that tied them to America by the mass immigration from cultures that were undermining and challenged European and American values, which had not been approved of or ever voted on by voters, and then were suppressing speech criticizing those things. Now, he acknowledged that this is exactly also what has been going on in the United States, but this was taken very amiss in Europe. So what's your take on the speech and the way and the reaction to it?
Well, in my opinion, it was taken so badly because he was exactly right. Now, first of all, in the bigger picture, this is kind of the flip side of what Trump talks about with Europe, where he's constantly telling the NATO countries that they need to spend more on their own defense. He's been saying that since he became president in 2017, and they are spending more on their own defense, but not enough.
Right.
So Trump keeps pushing that thing. On the other side, this is Vance talking about a cultural issue that Vance, I think, is just better able to address than Trump is. And you're right to talk about migration, because Vance said that is the biggest single most important issue that he's worried about. Right. And it has led to all sorts of restrictions on freedom of speech. Right. We had this bizarre scene on CBS on Sunday, where the moderator of Face the Nation somehow suggested that the free speech was used to cause the genocide, the Holocaust. Right. And then that night, 60 Minutes, also on CBS, did kind of a glowing profile of the German speech police, right, in which people are arrested. And I mean, police come to your apartment, right, for over something you have said on the internet, or something you liked, or a meme you liked on the internet. So this is extremely concerning, I think, to anyone, and it is used to suppress opposition to government policy, which is just one of the most undemocratic things you can think of. Right. So, of course, it made him really uncomfortable when J.D. Vance came and said it in pretty plain language.
Yeah, and as you say, I mean, the example you cited was in Germany, and the extraordinary reporting that day and commentary, glowing reporting on speech suppression on CBS, but Vance cited similar problems in the United Kingdom and in other parts of Europe. As you say, the Europeans are spending more on their own defense, but nothing like enough. Some of them, for example, Belgium, is spending less than half what they are supposed to be spending in their contribution. They have essentially been feckless partners in NATO. And then suddenly they are now putting on a show of being staunch on the issue of Ukraine. Whether they're spending enough is going to be a real test. But the focus of their concern, immediate concern, are the talks that are being held in Saudi Arabia between the United States and Russia. There's a lot of criticism that neither Ukraine, and this is on the Ukraine war, there was a lot of criticism that Ukraine was not involved in those talks and the European leadership was not involved in those talks. Now, this seems to me wide of the mark because these were just preliminary talks, and I've no doubt that both Ukraine and the European leaders will come in later. But it did allow the continuation of that narrative that Trump was going to reward Putin for aggression. What's your take on that, on what's going on here?
Well, to the first part of what you said, if you're a NATO country, and in a few days we're going to hit the third anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. If you're a NATO country 3 years into this war and you're spending less than you used to on defense, that's just crazy. It's just absolutely nuts. Now, as far as these talks are concerned, I think it's pretty easy to dismiss the EU countries and their concerns because they don't really have anything to say. They don't have anything to add to any talks now. But the bigger question is, well, what about the United States meeting with representatives of Russia at the Secretary of State level, the foreign minister level, and not including Ukraine? I think what's going on is Donald Trump, who has spent a long time thinking about this, did not want to start with some sort of talks where Russians and Ukrainians were across a table from each other. He wanted to explore issues before that. So he's actually conducting a kind of a shuttle, the old style Nixon shuttle diplomacy, where he sends some of his sends the Secretary of State and other top aides to the Middle East to talk to the Russians. And now Keith Kellogg, who is the retired general, former national security advisor for Mike Pence, who has been appointed the special envoy for Ukraine. Now he's in Kyiv talking to the Ukrainians. So they're not being left out of this. On the other hand, Trump felt, and I think he's probably right, that the first step in all this should not be to have the two warring parties yelling at each other across the table.
Yeah, no, I think that that's this. I would read it in the same way. I think that it's perfectly legitimate to have those talks, and as you say, there is a kind of shuttle diplomacy involved in that, and you don't want them shouting across the table. But immediately after the talks, President Trump said some things which really, frankly, were dismaying and allowed foreboding to build because. For example, he referred to Zelensky as having started the war. Now, my initial take on this was that he had said Zelensky should never have could have ended it quickly, and then he said he didn't even have to let it start. And I thought it might be a slip, but then Trump has followed up with even more attacks on Zelensky this morning, talking about using a point that Putin has made, that ironically and laughably perhaps, that the tyrant Putin has made about Zelensky lacking democratic support. And so Trump has doubled down on the attack on Zelensky, and it doesn't seem plausible to suggest there was any kind of slip up there. He really seems to be going after him. Now, this is very worrying and should not have been said. At least that's my take.
Well, now that Trump has said it, there are a couple of things. One, Zelensky did cancel a presidential election, declare martial law. Now you'd think, well, where would martial law be appropriate? Well, maybe in a place with a big war going on. So that's entirely appropriate, perhaps, in this. But Ukraine has gone past its time for a presidential election. Trump suggested that Zelensky only had a 4% job approval rating in Ukraine, which is wrong. And it's something the Russians do say. I don't know what his job approval rating is because, frankly, if you remember back during the Ukraine issues in 2014 and beyond that, and then the Ukraine-related impeachment of Donald Trump in 2019 and all the Paul Manafort stuff that had been going on with Manafort's legal problems, it was widely viewed as the most corrupt country in the world. And when I was reporting on some of this stuff, like Hunter Biden and the prosecutor who was fired, I mean, I came to think that I just have no idea what to believe coming out of
Right,
that country.
right,
I literally do not know what to believe.
right.
Now, so Trump shouldn't have said he had 4% because I find that completely wrong, whatever the real percentage really is. But finally, on the starting of the war, you make an excellent point about that. The Trump side are people who look at kind of a longer picture, and they believe that Ukraine and some people in the United States, like Victoria Nuland, had been kind of, jabbing the Russians for a long time and had been provocative. And of course, there had been a war in Donbass in the eastern Ukraine for a number of years, where Russia proxy forces were at war,
Hmm.
and that the Ukrainians essentially pushed the Russians into this. Well, obviously, Russia invaded Ukraine. I mean,
Right,
that's just the fact here. And that's got to be taken into account during these negotiations. So
right.
now that Trump has said this, was he just saying it to get a rise out of Zelensky, or why was he saying it? I don't know. He's the president of the United States. He shouldn't have said it. On the other hand, you do have to listen. There is a side that talks about provocations and pushing Russia, and that's something to be included in peace talks.
Yeah, it's clearly the case that people are being guided in their speculation about what is going on by their prejudices either for or against
Yeah,
Trump. And
yeah,
we do need to find out more. One hopes that in the talks with Russia, that Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, who was leading those talks, and others there made plain some pretty tough requirements of Russia. But we will obviously have to keep monitoring that. So I want to turn now finally to domestic issues and to something that you and I have both written about, and that is the way in which Donald Trump is flooding the zone so that Democrats don't know what to fight and they don't know what to let slide. And I saw Hakeem Jeffries, I think just today or in the last 24 hours, referring to Trump as Captain Chaos. It's not a very good nickname. He's not as good at it as Trump, nor indeed as practiced as Trump is in these things. But the point that you have written about, and I think is worth amplifying, is that the Democrats are finding that 2025 is very, very different from 2017. They
yep.
don't know. They just isn't the same kind of level or opportunity for opposition.
I started on this on one of the Sunday shows. Representative Jamie Raskin, the Democrat, who is the top Democrat on the House Judiciary Committee, which would originate an impeachment if there were one, said on one of the Sunday shows that if there were simply different political environment, that Trump could well be impeached over the Eric Adams dropping the charges against the New York mayor, Eric Adams issue. And it just kind of got me started about when Democrats were talking about impeachment of President Trump in 2017 when he
Right.
first took office. And there was a lot of talk about it during the transition, about how Trump could be removed as quickly as possible. And there was a famous story published in the Washington Post called "The Effort to Impeach President Trump Has Begun," and it was posted on the Post website at 12:19 p.m. on January
Right.
20th,
Right.
2017, when Trump had been president for 19 minutes.
Right. Right.
And then if you look back at the first weeks, the weeks we've just been watching, those analogous weeks in the first Trump administration, consumed with Russia accusations,
Right.
consumed with the Michael Flynn affair. The FBI goes to the White House, interviews Flynn. He has to resign on February the 13th, 2017. Trump is asked about this all the time. He spends more time denying accusations about Russia than he does governing.
Right.
And that was the idea. And
Right.
so the Russia issue sort of crippled Trump at the beginning, and then it went on and crippled him for the first couple of years.
Yeah,
And it was an
those couple of
entirely
weeks.
different atmosphere.
Yeah, those early weeks of the Trump administration gave credibility, or at least gave the opportunity for all of those outside Washington who say, the place is run by people at cocktail parties and smoke-filled rooms.
Yeah.
All you had to do was attend some of those things, and you could hear the plotting and the planning going on. And
Yeah.
we both
Yeah.
encountered that. That's where I'm going to leave it, Byron. Thank you very much for joining us, and thank you all for joining us on Political Perspectives. Remember, as I say, to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and we'll see you again here next time.